Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an independent candidate, is polling at an astonishing 15% on RCP's aggregate, as Trump leads with 39.8%, Joe Biden trailing at 35.5%, and Kennedy getting 15% of the support. Now, 15% is not nearly enough to win the presidency, or perhaps any state. He might not even get second place in any jurisdiction, other than perhaps Washington, D.C., when Donald Trump's support is just so low. Nevertheless, it is not a negligible group of voters. More than 1 in 7 voters have expressed support for Robert F. Kennedy. And really, the important question is, who does this benefit, Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Now, if we look at the polling just between the head-to-head matchup between the two men, you can see that, generally speaking, Trump is only leading by 1.7% against Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup. But with RFK Jr. on the ballot, Trump leads by 4.3%, suggesting that RFK Jr.'s presence would split more of the vote away from Democrats than the Republicans. The argument that RFK Jr. will split more of the vote from Biden primarily comes from the fact that he is more liberal on social issues, and generally he was a Democrat before he decided to run as an independent. Conversely, the primary argument that RFK Jr. will split more of the vote away from Donald Trump as opposed to Joe Biden is that Trump supporters are more likely to be friendly to his anti-vax ideology, and also the fact that he fell out of the mainstream Democratic Party after his pretty much anti-vax comments. Overall speaking, however, he will probably split voters away from both sides, as a matter of fact, because both of these men are pretty old. Trump is in his late 70s, Joe Biden is in his early 80s, and the fact is there are anti-Trump Republicans and never Biden Democrats who are going to be voting for an alternative, and in this case, the alternative is Robert Kennedy. Now, I don't believe that Kennedy will be holding out 15% because generally speaking, third-party candidates or independents generally drop when they get closer to the general election. However, even then, we still probably will see Kennedy have some influence over the electoral map. Now moving forward with the electoral map. As you can see right now, the map is still blank, but we're going to start off with filling in Joe Biden's safe states. So the states of Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii here, they're all going to be safe states for Joe Biden. He's going to win them by more than 12 points, as well as that the District of Columbia, Maryland, we're also going to see the state of Connecticut, the state of Delaware, the state of Vermont, the state of Rhode Island, and the state of Massachusetts. And I also think, as well as that, here, that would be pretty much it. Well, for Donald Trump, we do see Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana, the state of Nebraska with its 1st District and 3rd District, the state of Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and Missouri in the safe Republican column. Now, notably, I have left out a couple of states that are generally considered safe for the Democrats, those states being the states of New Jersey, the state of New York, as well as the state of Illinois. Now, all 3 of those states in this map will be considered likely states because I don't think their support will be so consolidated over Joe Biden. There's a lot of Democrats in those states who are somewhat frustrated with the Democratic agenda, and without RFK Jr. in the race, perhaps they would still vote for a Democratic candidate like Joe Biden by a safe margin of about 12 or 13 points. RFK's presence would probably split away some of those voters who feel disengaged with the Democratic Party and vote for a third party like RFK Jr. or perhaps someone like Cornel West or Jill Stein. Ignoring those candidates, we do see RFK could split away enough of the Democratic vote to end up giving Republicans a narrower Democratic victory in those states. New York in particular, we saw that in 2022. Kathy Hochul defeated Lee Zeldin there by just around 8%, a relatively close margin considering the fact that the state actually voted for Joe Biden in 2020 by 23 points. Trump could improve the state by winning counties like Nassau County, perhaps flipping some of the counties upstate. I don't think that he's going to make it with an 8, but I think in this scenario it could be 11 or 12 points. I think Colorado and New Mexico as well, both of these states here are going to be in the likely Democratic column, as well as that the state of Virginia. Now, I see a valid argument in saying that Colorado or New Mexico could be in the likely perhaps for the state of New Mexico could be in the lead lead Democratic column. However, I don't think that argument is particularly persuasive in my opinion. I do still have New Mexico in the likely Democratic column, just because of the fact that the state did vote for Joe Biden by around 11 points in 2020. To shift the state 6 points is quite a significant shift, especially because Bernalillo County and Santa Fe County, these two counties make up quite a bit of the state's population, almost half of it, and really they're remarkably liberal, so it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to make it within 5 points, as Mark Ronchetti lost the state in 2022, I believe, by more than 10 points, although he was expected to make this race quite competitive. Now, finally, here for Maine's 1st district, I will still have it in the same Democratic column just because of Portland in the state, just super liberal area, and it also makes up the majority of the district's population. Here, Portland, Oregon, Cumberland County, Joe Biden won that county more than 2-1 against Donald Trump, so that wraps up the likely states for Joe Biden. On here to the likely Republican states. First off, we have the state of Alaska here. Donald Trump won the state by 10 points, not too surprising, into the likely Republican column. Going to the state of South Carolina here, probably in the safe column. He won the state by about 12 points, and with RFK in the race, and with the poor generic ballot for Joe Biden, I'm not going to be surprised if this is a safe race for Donald Trump. Furthermore, speaking in the states of Iowa and Ohio here, I'm going to give them both to Donald Trump by likely margins. Both of these races voted for Donald Trump by 8% in 2020 by roughly identical margins. Both of them didn't really shift blue between 2016 and 2020, despite polling suggesting that these races would end up narrowing. And also, these are more white, rural, working class states that have generally just shifted away from the Democratic Party. I think in this scenario, Trump will be winning them by close to a safe margin. I really do think that RFK Jr. will end up appealing a lot of Democrats who are not too comfortable with Joe Biden away from the Democratic Party and towards him, and I think that would be sufficient to perhaps move it to a safe margin. Nonetheless, I do have Donald Trump here winning by probably about 11 to 12 points. The Maine's 2nd congressional district here, this is a region where Trump has had an everlasting impact in favor of the Republican Party. You see, in the state of Maine here, about 2 decades ago, back in 2000s or 2008, for example, Obama won the district by a safe margin. However, Donald Trump, despite losing the state overall by 9 points, carried this rural Republican district by about 8%, quite an impressive margin, considering the swing in just about 2 decades of about R+20. Now we see that really Democrats have not done too well in the district, and I don't think that in such a scenario where RFK Jr. could perhaps split away some of the other Democratic voters in the state who have become less and less inclined to vote for Joe Biden to end up doing well here. I do think that Donald Trump will probably win the district by a likely margin. Now the next state here is the state of Florida. This again is a state where it's on the verge of safe, because first of all, the trends here are just so bad for Democrats. Miami-Dade County in particular trended 22 points to Donald Trump in 2020. Hispanic voters in the state are not looking too good for Joe Biden right now, and also the fact that RFK Jr.'s mere presence on the ballot will end up helping the Republican Party in general in this presidential election. Furthermore, speaking, rural turnout will probably be higher. And Democratic turnout, again, Hispanic voters, Cuban voters have shifted about 20 points in favor of the Republicans between the years of about 2016 to 2024. Though those figures are not entirely accurate, they do generally demonstrate a substantial population in the Miami-Dade County region, Broward County, and Palm Beach County. These 3 counties alone make up more than 50% of the state's votes, in fact closer to 20%. And that's really concerning for Democrats if they want any chance of actually winning the state of Florida, which look increasingly slim. Pretty much most people project that Florida would not be a swing state by about 2030. So that would put Florida in the likely Republican category. Now going to the state of Texas here. Texas is a state trending to Democrats, don't get me wrong. However, in this election, it again doesn't look too good for Democrats because RFK Jr. is on the ballot number 1 in this scenario, where he does split away more of the Democratic vote. We also see that Hispanic voters in this region of the state, for example, especially Starr County here, shifted 55 points away towards the Republicans, But nonetheless, these are small counties, but they have a tremendous impact because how large the shifts are. If this is a 1 or 2% shift, it is pretty negligible for a Democratic candidate, but considering these are 40-point shifts or even 55% shifts, for example, Hidalgo County, 200,000 votes, a 23% shift is actually quite significant. You do generally see that Republicans have done quite well in the Hispanic regions. Add that to the fact that RFK Jr. might split away a lot of the moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats who voted for Joe Biden because they didn't like Trump and now I don't like Joe Biden either and are gonna vote for someone like RFK. That could be a problem for Democrats in general. And overall, I think Texas in this scenario would go for the Republican Party by about 8 to 9 points, which is more than what it was in 2020. Now, furthermore, here in the state of North Carolina, I do believe that in this scenario, RFK Jr. will help the Republicans and ensure that Democrats, especially Joe Biden, would not win. Now, a poll that came out a couple of days ago had Donald Trump leading the state 50% to 45%. That's consistent with most people's predictions. Generally, in the state, we see that Democrats, again, as some other states, have done better in some of the more suburban regions, specifically Wake County, as well as that Mecklenburg County, so where Charlotte is located and where Raleigh is located. However, some of the rural areas are what's going to set Democrats back here. For example, the rural, I believe, 14th district in the state is something that is concerning for Democrats. They did have some gains back in 2020, however, those gains are unlikely to hold. We also see that in this rural black district over here, this is an area that is trending towards the Republicans. In 2020, despite Democrats making about a 2% gain overall in the state, you can see that pretty much all the counties over here trended towards the Republican Party, and that these rural districts, although they don't make up as substantial of a population as, say, a county like Mecklenburg County or its suburbs, these do have an everlasting impact on the state, and overall, in a state like North Carolina, which is really close, the only state that Trump won and did not get 50% of the total vote, we see that this could be problematic for Republicans, especially because RFK Jr. is on the ballot and Joe Biden's just not polling too well overall. Now the next state here on the likely Republican column, which will get Trump very close to his 270 total needed to win, is the state of Georgia here. Now, Trump is already at 235. He has won every state and district that he won back in 2020, and he's going to build onto that with the state of Georgia. In the state of Georgia here, we see the Atlanta metropolitan area trending heavily towards Democrats. We see a county like Gwinnett County, for example, a county like Henry County, a county like Rockdale County, Douglas County, Cobb County, right? These are very populated counties around the Atlanta region. Even in counties that are more rural, Cherokee County and Forsyth County, these are population centers in the state where there's a lot of vote dumps in these type of regions. We see Hillary Clinton generally won these counties, but by 3 or 4 points, and we see that Joe Biden expanded some of these margins here to about 15 points or 20 points. For example, Mitt Romney in 2012 or John McCain in 2008, they won pretty much most of these counties, such as Gwinnett County, Cobb County, Henry County, or Newton County. Now, one of the problems for the Democratic Party is the rural areas. The state still has a lot of rural counties, and there's a lot of really conservative regions. For example, MTG's district here up in the rural part of the state, there's no chance Democrats are going to make inroads here. In fact, Trump may be able to make inroads in already very conservative regions of the state. And also, generally speaking, Republicans do win most of the districts here. And it's not really due to gerrymandering, it's just due to the fact that the congressional districts in the state and the geography is unfavorable for Democrats, but it's kind of hard for Democrats to pretty much overcome all of these rural areas with just one pretty much Democratic voting center. And the fact is, in 2024, Democrats will not be able to do as well in the Atlanta suburban region. 1, because of RFK, and 2, because of the fact that Joe Biden is old. Some people question his mental acuity, even some Democrats. And generally, those anti-Trump voters, those college-educated anti-Trump voters, they're not as inclined to go out and vote. Because how close the state was back in 2020, I think that in this scenario, Donald Trump will win the state of Georgia by probably a likely margin, which gets Trump to 251, 19 shy of the presidency. Joe Biden is trailing in the electoral vote count, let's give Joe Biden some of his lean states. First off, in the state of Maine here, although there is the RFK Jr. influence, we do see that Maine's first district is safe and the second district is likely, and generally the second district produces less votes, and overall it just looks like that Joe Biden will still be able to win the state. Now there was a poll that came out I believe a couple days ago, that had Donald Trump up in the state by 4% overall and had him winning Maine's second district by 20 and losing Maine's first congressional district by just 5%. However, that is not realistic because of Portland, which is pretty much the state's largest city. And generally, this county alone produces about a third to a fourth of the total vote in the state. And generally, it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to overcome a city like this, especially because the rural regions aren't really that conservative and really lack a lot of votes. Now, going to another area that will be in the lean Democratic column, that will be the state of New Hampshire. We saw in the Democratic primary here that Joe Biden ran a write-in campaign. He still got 63.8%, not the most impressive for an incumbent, but nevertheless he still won. And generally, Trump is not the most popular in the state. In the Republican primary against Nikki Haley, Trump only won by 11%. Sure, a lot of the voters were independents, but even still, you see that independent voters generally preferred Nikki Haley, and also the fact that there are a lot of white college-educated voters, especially because there are cities like, for example, Manchester, Nashua, Concord, Dover, right, the 4 cities labeled in the map. These are all located in counties that are trending towards the Democrats heavily, mostly because of their anti-Trump sentiment. We see that in one of the recent polls there, that Haley polls 5% better than Donald Trump does in the state, and overall speaking, it just looks unlikely that Trump will be able to win the state of New Hampshire, even with the aid of RFK Jr. Now, Nebraska's second district. I would like to compare this to New Hampshire. Essentially, it's a similar demographic, right? It's a similar trend. Joe Biden won the district here in 2020 by 7%, carrying the 1 electoral vote here. Now, Joe Biden would have only won the district by 4 in 2020, given the new boundaries. However, again, this is an area white college educated, more bachelor degrees, more master degrees, and generally it's a group of voters that Joe Biden is performing relatively well with, and it's just looking unlikely that Trump will actually be able to win the district, even with RFK's aid, because of some of the demographics. There's a lot of voters in that particular demographic there, white college educated, that are not going to vote for Donald Trump. Therefore, this is a lean district for Joe Biden. Now I'm going to give another state here to Joe Biden, the state of Minnesota, this time by a tilt margin. The reason this one is tilt is also fairly straightforward. We see that with RFK here that Democrats, again, there was a lot of uncommitted voters in the state. Only about 70% of the state's voters decided to vote for Joe Biden. On the Democratic primary side, 20% voted uncommitted, which means they were essentially voting as protest votes. Now, a lot of this could mitigate or just go away by election day because a lot of the uncommitted votes was for Joe Biden's support of Israel over Palestine, which was problematic with some young voters, college-educated young voters, as a matter of fact. Some of that will go away, but the problem here for Democrats is still that the Minneapolis region, we saw a lot of uncommitted voters. There were a lot of people angry with Joe Biden and just frustrated in general. And because this state is a close state, we do see that even some small shifts could result in a big difference in the electoral vote count. And we do see that in this state in particular, I do believe that Joe Biden will win, but with RFK's influence by just a tilt margin. Now here going to some states for Donald Trump in the lean Republican category. First off, the state of Wisconsin. Now this is not too surprising. Joe Biden won the state by less than a point. In fact, he won the state by less of a margin than Trump won the state back in 2016. There's a lot of rural areas where Republicans have been overperforming. Even in 2020, we see that there's a lot of voters here that despite the state overall and the national environment overall trending towards Biden, there are counties that shifted towards the Republican Party. Now, the big problem for Donald Trump here in 2020 was the wild counties, Ozaukee County, Washington County, and the big one here, Waukesha County. Now, there are white college-educated voters, and these are the type of regions where Donald Trump's going to bleed in terms of support. However, he has more than enough areas in the rural areas to end up compensating for that, and Democratic turnout may be slightly lower because of dissatisfaction towards Joe Biden in general, and I do think that overall Donald Trump will be able to win the state by a lean margin. Now, with Donald Trump at 261 electoral votes, he is just inches away from the presidential election as he only needs one of the three states of Arizona, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. First off, in the state of Nevada here, with its 6 electoral votes, it will not be enough to put Donald Trump over the presidency. However, it's still quite crucial. Looking at the state of Nevada here, you see that pretty much about 2/3 or 3/4 of the entire vote comes out of Clark County, the single largest county in the state in terms of population. Now, this is also a county that is more Hispanic, and Hispanic voters have been generally trending away from Democrats and towards Republicans. In the 2022 midterms, this was one of the few areas that had more of a red wave, and in general, Republicans flipped the governor's race, and Kevin Cortez Masto only won by less than a point. We see that again in both of those races, the margins in Clark County again narrowed between the Democrat and the Republican. Furthermore speaking, we do see that the rural areas in Nevada are particularly red compared to some of the other states. For example, we saw in Michigan and Wisconsin, where Trump is getting about 60% of the rural areas. In the state of Nevada here, Trump is getting closer to about 70%. Now, one of the areas Democrats could do better is Washoe County, where Biden won the county by 4.5. This is an area that is generally trending slightly more towards the Democratic Party and looks more favorable in general in terms of Democrats. However, again, RFK Jr.'s support and influence may be enough for Trump to win the state, especially considering the generic ballot and just in general the trends of the state, especially in Clark County. Now, going to the state overall here, I do believe I'm going to put it in the tilt Republican column. Now, going to the state of Arizona. Now, in the state of Arizona, it is a more moderate state where Joe Biden was able to flip the state in the first time since 1996, mostly in part because of the state has a lot of moderate voters. That might be a group of voters that RFK Jr. might try to peel off, and he perhaps may be able to get double digits in the state like Arizona. Now, Phoenix County is the focus of the state, as well as Pima County. These two counties make up about 70% of the state's electorate, if not higher. Now, both of these counties shifted about 5 points to Joe Biden in 2020, pretty much the two counties in the state that ultimately decided the presidential election result. Maricopa County in particular is crucial. Whoever wins the county will probably end up winning the state in November. However, Joe Biden did do 2% better in Maricopa County than the state in general. Now, there are a lot of voters in the state who are willing to vote for RFK Jr. again, and that if they don't have that option, they're more likely to vote for Biden because he is seen as more centrist than Donald Trump by a lot of more moderate voters in the state of Arizona. And there was a Never Trump movement here in 2020, and I think that with that movement largely gone, especially with RFK out of the race, in the race here, I do think that Donald Trump will win the state of Arizona, which puts Donald Trump at 278 electoral votes, or in fact winning the presidential election. But we're not done here with two other states remaining to allocate. First off, in the state of Michigan, there was a huge uncommitted vote in the state of Michigan, and although some of those voters, in fact most of those voters, will end up coming home for Joe Biden, there are a lot of voters here, especially in Dearborn, Detroit, where Joe Biden actually lost the primary to uncommitted in Dearborn, Detroit, where we saw pretty much the uncommitted vote here was at about 20% in Detroit and on Ann Arbor, where there were a lot of college-educated voters who were not happy with Biden's support of Israel, and there were also a lot of more Arab Americans. Those are voters that overwhelmingly typically support Democrats, who this time around may be considering for either Donald Trump or they're just considering to go home. Now, that might not seem too significant because Dearborn itself is only about 150,000 in population. However, in such a close state, that could definitely have devastating impacts for Biden, especially because out of the state's about 750,000 primary goers, about 100,000 voted uncommitted. Now, that shows some resentment against Joe Biden in the state, and with RFK Jr. on the ballot, many Democrats who would otherwise vote for Biden in fear of Donald Trump may switch to the alternative of RFK Jr. or a protest vote. In doing so, RFK Jr. would effectively help Donald Trump win the state of Michigan. Now you might be winning. You might be thinking, why doesn't that logic apply to Trump voters? Well, a lot of anti-Trump voters are either going to stay home or they're going to vote for Joe Biden. Those anti-Trump Republicans, they've pretty much been decided already that they're not going to support Trump. So RFK Jr.'s presence in this race will not negatively or adversely impact Trump as much as it does Biden. Now going to the state of Pennsylvania here. Now polling has suggested that this race is actually closer than both Michigan and Wisconsin, which is quite interesting. However, there are a lot of rural areas in the state where Trump is kind of maxed out, but he does have more room to improve. And we see that the election will ultimately come down to some of the more suburban areas of the state. For example, Chester County, Delaware County, Montgomery County, and Bucks County. Those are the four most important counties in the state. Another area is Philadelphia County, where we see if Democratic turnout is lower in the Democratic primary, which the primary hasn't been held yet, but that could be an assumption we could make. Perhaps there is less enthusiasm on Joe Biden's side, because after all, he is older in general, and that voters may see RFK again as an alternative. The problem again isn't as severe for Donald Trump, and generally voters either love him or hate him, so there's not really an in-between where voters who vote for Trump are gonna go for RFK Jr. Ultimately though, I think that RFK will be able to peel off some of these suburban voters who don't like either alternative but are leaning towards Biden if in a two-horse race. Ultimately, I do think that that would gift Donald Trump the state of Pennsylvania, and with that, Trump wins the presidency with 312 electoral votes to Joe Biden at 226. In terms of popular vote here, I think that will be kind of close in the popular vote wise. I think that Trump might actually narrowly win the popular vote, perhaps around 46% to Joe Biden at 45%, RFK at about 7 to 8%, and the other candidates garnering 1 to 2%. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can see the channel subscribe icon here and the video over here. Be sure to click on both elements. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.